Welcome to iRuleThem Hold'em Poker Simulator. This video gives you an overview about the app iRuleThem version 4.0. I introduce you to the basic functionality and show you a few examples on how to use the app and interpret its results properly. Here, an iPhone 5 is in use for live screen recording. This means every operation behaves exactly the same as it would on your own equally equipped device with iOS version 6.1.4. Therefore, you can also find out how insanely fast the simulation procedure on such a device is. My objective during this presentation is to keep you up and running with the app. For that reason, what I really need you to do is to follow my instructions with your maximum level of attention. We got a lot of topics to cover, so let's get things started. After loading the app, you're landing on the main screen. Call it Setup Screen. Here you define your own hole cards as well as the known community cards. Furthermore, the screen is the location where the simulation details, like the number of opponents or all-in, can be entered. Alternatively to the custom-produced interface, iRuleThem offers specific voice controls for the definition of your poker situation. The voice recorder can be activated by touching on the iPhone icon with the tone symbol in it, speaking of the musical note. The audio speech recording feature isn't part of this introduction. To get started, the documentation of iRuleThem features a nice index of any available voice control in its About section. Next, I show you what I mean by touching the information symbol. This is the content of the documentation. Now I go into the About section, go to the next screen. There it is.
Tap 2.
Or
Against 5.
following the voice recorder option, the simulation can be started by using the Simulate button. Furthermore, a running simulation can be aborted by touching the simulation activity indicator, the circular progress animation at the bottom, or by simply navigating into the configuration. Next, I define my hand as Ace-King of Hearts. The hand Ace-King of Hearts uses the nickname Big Slick. It's a very strong and promising catch. The optimum case for Ace-King is when there aren't any pocket pairs in the race. This could often be validated by a bet of about 2 to 4 times the big blind. Nevertheless, a race isn't always a clever approach. When your opponents aren't very aggressive and often play lower aces, you want all of them remain in the hand. The passive strategy is usually forcing you to hit the flop to continue with betting. Nevertheless, there are those scenarios where betting is favorable. In case you got position and your opponents are checking with their holding. Furthermore, the board texture is also a relevant factor to consider before doing so. After that, I define 2 opponents to run against. Speaking of 2 relatively tight opponents, using that slider. When having your cards available, the hands rank out of 169 generalized hands can be found. It's displayed right next to the user's hand. Check the area following the fingertips in the lower part of the screen. For the configured environment, which is a 9-player table without preflop all-in, the hand is ranked 7th. Attention! From a statistical point of view, Ace-King gets even stronger when played with pre-flop all-in declaration. But This ultimately depends on your opponent's skills and playing behavior. After you believe that your table is really tight, you should play Ace-King passively and hide its true value. The background idea of this passive move is that you don't believe that many people are willing to call a substantial raise or even an all-in with a worse starting hand. Therefore, you're just calling the preflop bet and extract some more money on a later street. In the spot after an ace or a king occurs with the flop, the likelihood that you possess the winning hand is quite good. This means only two pair variants or small pocket pair that turn into a three of a kind monster would in most cases end up badly. Overall seen, these hands are very unlikely to occur, especially on post-flop time. Stronger hand combination aren't very likely and therefore only to consider after the flop is all sequenced, like 8, 9 and 10, or monocolored, all spades, or even both criteria simultaneously. Nevertheless, this combination occur most time as recently as turn or the river gets drawn. By far more often the opponent holds at post-flop time only a draw onto such a straight or flush hand. After an all-in declaration, the hand is ranked 5th out of 169. Its rank is currently 2 places improved. After enabling, the app uses the hand rankings for pre-flop all-in cases. That fact is displayed over the all-in switch. It's named pre-flop all-in and the state is set to on. With occurred all-in, better pre-flop hands are jacks, queens, kings or aces. All the stronger and better ranked hands are placed above the selection. All weaker hands are located below. If you're on a loose table, a final table of a multi-table tournament, or when playing against an aggressor ace-king needs to be protected with an all-in declaration. When everybody acts very aggressively, the game is often already decided on pre-flop time. Therefore, almost every game leads to someone who declares himself all-in. This would be a good spot to get it in. In the later phases of a tournament, this situation is most times arising. Notice, after I shared all this information, I disable the all-in option again. Alright, it's time to show you the configuration of the environment. The first configuration screen is all about the definition and adjustment of existing starting hand ranges. They are based on either stats for the amount of played and overall given hands, or the frequency. Otherwise, the tap counter supports tracking the playing behavior opponent wisely to resolve those stats. The next view is where the overall settings of the app are handled. Various features like against best option or starting hand ranges are dependent on the first setting, overall opponents at the table. This setting is currently set to 8 overall opponents. This leads to a 9-player table environment. For each specific setup, there exists a unique commencing hand ranking organization, which reflects the most likely game scenarios. The rankings are normally based on the chance to win the upcoming flop, otherwise for, and only for, pre-flop all-in situations. Those rankings are based on all upcoming streets, including the river. The reality behind this design approach is that you only bet with your hand for the following game round. It's wrong to believe you will receive free cards until to the showdown. Furthermore, the against best option is enabled, defining that you only run against the best dealt starting hands of any opponent. This option is handy for opponents with a relative tight playing style. Besides, percent indicates that the app uses such a likelihood structure instead of odds or a plain decimal value. The simulation performs a total of 5,000 random tries to determine its equity of holding the winning hand. Each experiment can be visualized individually by aid of the single deal modes. After returning back to the setup, you're nicely prepared to understand the configured environment of the first simulation. Ace-King suited against the table's strongest two hands. The hand offers a bit more than a coin flip as the odds of winning post-flop. Pre-flop, the likelihood of holding the winning hand is even higher. This can be recognized by the percent values attached to the win hand respectively win flop labels. Here it's 59% for win hand and 51% for the win flop position. iRuleThem also features diagrams which are available when the first version of the simulation results gets displayed. This happens almost instantly after just a tick. Again, I'll do another simulation and quickly open the detail screen with the diagrams. The simulation has already done 1000 tries, but remember, here iRuleThem is running on an iPhone 5. On that device, the first results are available when about half a second is passed. After a few seconds, it's all over. On a predecessor device like the iPhone 4S or 4, this simulation also needs less than a second for its first results. Here you can learn that after hitting the flop, Ace-King suited remains in most cases the winning hand. This is because of the high kicker value. When the board offers a pair, Ace-King suited might sometimes be beaten by a stronger hand. Otherwise, with a resulting high card combination, expect to be the underdog in more games than not versus two opponents. Other combinations like 2-pair, 3 of a kind are relatively unlikely to occur after drawing the flop. Nevertheless, the chance of winning the pot with such a flop-made hand is even greater than with a 1-pair hand. This is recognizable by the missing or small red chairs in the bar diagrams of these hand combination categories. A very important skill in poker is to compare your chance of winning with your risk-reward ratio. The risk-reward ratio in poker is called pot odds. Now I jump into the decision support screen to give you some in-view. The pot odds are the ratio between the pot size, the amount you might win, and the bet size, the bet you risk to lose. Seen together in comparison with the probability of winning, they are describing if playing your hand as a positive or negative expectation in the long term. Say, the first opponent opens from middle position with a $2 bet, and subsequently the opponent from the cutoff calls. Now it's decision time because my own playing position is on the dealer button. After my position follow the small blind and the big blind. When summing all bets up and including the posted blinds, it's $5.50 in the pot and $2 is requested. With the intention of calling, This situation is profitable spot because the inverse pod odds is lower than the success expectation. This fact leads to the expected value, which displays the average value gain plus CV or value loss minus CV of the next betting round. After drawing the yet unknown flop, on average a plus of $1.84 is resulting. Nice! In case of both a call and a raise, the pot is constantly given without the user's open or chosen bet amount. Furthermore, when having already paid a share of that requested bet amount or playing from a blind position, this share has to be declared in the user's share field. Such a share is always added into the pot because of previous wagering. At any time after an opponent or the user has declared a bet, call or posted his blinds, the wager is included to the pot's overall amount. Raise. Moreover, for the use case raise, you have to identify all opponent shares put together from one you believe they will call the open bet amount of your own raise. If that bet is big enough, it's at most times no more than one remaining opponent. Thereafter rarely such an action went on 3 or more handed. Say for this specific example, I'd prefer to re-raise instead of calling the $2 bet. That's because of the information that both opponents are somehow passive, don't play many hands, and furthermore have already called such pre-flop raises on numbers of occasions. Thereafter, they show with medium drawing hands like Queen 10, Ace High with a worse kicker or even bottom pair at the showdown. This specific opponent type acts rather tightly and also passively, what gives me the advantage of maximizing my profit with taking only a slightly greater risk. This is because with Ace-King suited I normally want to see the flop. Now you get my reasons why I strongly believe they will both make the call. Therefore, the sum of their already paid bet amount is 2 callers multiplied by $2 each. This is equal to $4. Therefore, I define the changed betting reality in the interface. The pot remains $5.50. The bet is $5 and the op shares are $4 combined. Now the extracted value from playing Ace-King suited is even higher, but this outcome depends on my opponent's skills. A seasoned player would forfeit interest in the current pot with only an ace plus a low kicker, King 10 or Queen 10 by folding such a not enough value providing hand. Okay, that depends on his playing style and my own image, but we are considering tight aggressive as given ideal here. Okay, enough betting specifics. Now it's going to be very interesting, visualization time. But before I start, keep in mind that the hand offers a bit more than 50% as chance of winning the flop. And more importantly, the expected value from this specific example is plus $3.44. Good, because after remembering these two numbers and joining the single deal mode, you're going to find out how they both relate to reflect your hand play outcome. Furthermore, after joining the single deal mode, you can visualize several hand outcomes and receive a general idea of the configuration in use. You receive a demo how every setting works as long as there are no more than 4 opponents involved in the hand. For commencing, I simply use the eval button. First, 8 starting hands are drawn and ordered by their strength. Next, the strongest subset of them is dealt to the opponents in play. Because there are 2 opponents defined, they receive the strongest and the second best of all dealt starting hands. Here it's King, Queen and Jack 10. After performing some more visualization examples, you get a feeling how everything works based on your setup. Furthermore, you also get an idea of your opponent's strength by checking their played hands. Here the first opponent plays pocket 2s and hits the flop, and the next opponent is on King 8 suited. These visualizations show the against best configuration at work to mirror real table conditions without considering the opponent's playing styles. It uses an average point of view, what means it performs well when nobody raises the bet massively. This is because of a tied raiser's narrower range of only top hands, which perform much better than average. Here the opponent 1 has King Jack suited and opponent 2 is on King 6. When playing at the normal table with mixed playing styles between medium loose and tight, this option does a very good job in providing hands. But after believing that there only could remain premium hands like Ace King, medium pairs, kings or aces, using the against best configuration isn't the way to go. This thought is related on previous pre-flop betting that is more substantial than usual, higher bet amounts. I have won by hitting the ace. Opponent 1 is on a 1 pair hand with 10s, and opponent 2 has a pair of 8s. Otherwise, playing against amateurs without any idea about what they are actually doing, using that mode is also wrong. The same is valid when playing against only very aggressive players. Above and beyond, the wagering becomes less important too. When having numerous very aggressive opponents, this results in having one of them raising the bet massively or even declaring himself all in with almost every single game. This time opponent 1 is the winner with a pair of 2s. Now I fast forward the next 5 hands until the 10th evaluation is done. Therefore I touch the eye behind the playing cards. Ace Jack and pocket 5s, 10s and 5s, queens and pocket 4s, Jack 9 2 times, now I hit 2 kings, so I have 3 of a kind poker hand with an ace kicker. What is, of course, the winning hand. Opponent 1 has nothing but the pair on the board with an ace kicker, and opponent 2 has 2 pair kings and sixes. Reconsider the expected value gain per game from the preceding pod odds analysis. It has been $3.44. After multiplying that times 10, it's $34.40. That's done because of 10 repeated sessions. Now it's time to compare, but remember the average gain depends on the equity of winning the flop. Down here you can find out that the win flop winning position for this 10 tries is given with 40%. That's worse. The simulation had a success or win flop variable that is 51.17%. So a bit more than a coin flip. So we expect less than $34.40. I would guess maybe half, about. We'll see. The stack change from this 10 evaluation is $16. During 10 hand repetitions I have won 4 times $11.50, what equals $46. In those games I have reached the winning hand combination. There hasn't been a draw ending resulting in 0 for the tied position. Additionally, I have lost 6 times my bet of $5. This makes a total loss of $30. When summing the won, tie and loss positions together, they are leading to my stack change. Overall, I have increased my own stack by $16. Not bad, right? Next, I enter the drawn cards for the flop. They are Jack of Hearts, 10 of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds. After touching the space right after the fingertips when having a valid amount of community cards defined, determines the hand's ranking among all combined 5-card poker hands. With this flop, the high value bluffing hand Ace King suited of hearts is ranked 281st out of 1073 different hand combos. Furthermore, you receive an overview about all the possible hand combination kinds which are reachable by unknown hole cards. Up here, every made hand combination has its own symbol. Black highlighted is your own hand combination. Here it's 1 pair. With the board given, 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind, a full house, or even poker are combinations which might occur in play by holding matching pocket cards. Touching the first given hole card, speaking of the ace, replaces both pocket cards but keeps the board. The app needs a specified user hand as well as any valid amount of community cards for performing a simulation. The next hand candidate is called the nuts, what means there's no stronger hand combination available on the current street post-flop. Only a bad turn could change this hand play outcome. Nevertheless, having an opponent on a straight flush draw or a full house with jacks is somehow unlikely. Additionally, these hands need to hidden out to improve to the winning hand. Therefore, hitting the only one or two remaining card in the deck isn't expectable. When having poker or quads with any board, it's definitively worth to go broke for. When touching the space next to the fingertips again, you can recognize that my hand is best. Alternatively, the stats are also displayed after simulating your hands. Optionally, to replacing both whole cards, you could only replace the second one to check the influence of various kicker cards. Additionally, to choosing the fitting cards, you can use the dealer interface. It's intuitively working like a CD player. The next button deals the cards of the following street. The previous redeals the latest portion of cards once more. If appropriate, before dealing community cards, the dealer first completes the user's hand. Simulate a bird by hitting the simulation activity indicator. Redeal. Simulate the bird. Let's deal this hand to the river. And look at the showdown hand. You can also touch on the board to remove community cards and replace them with others if desired. Now I touch on the turn and define the turn to make a full house with another 6. Touching the new button recreates an empty setup environment without predefined simulation details like whole cards, opponent card specifications and community cards. Before continuing, I redefine my own hand back to Ace-King suited. After touching the right button, the opponent screen appears. In the lower part, next to the whole card label, you define and identify the whole cards or starting hand ranges of your opponents. Over that area, the made hand specification can be found. The topic of made hands is way more sophisticated and therefore skipped. After touching the Add button, you can specify 2 opponent whole cards. Now the opponent plays deuces. After a specific opponent gives up, you can use the fold O button surrounding that opponent's hand. Next, I fold the hand of opponent 1, the only opponent with a specific whole card. Also with 2 of them, of course. The plus button creates a normal starting hand range. Such a range is default in iRuleThem. Therefore, when talking about a starting hand range without further description, it's always this type of range. This opponent plays a hand that is stronger or equal than pocket 2s. A hint for iRuleThem's notation. It's important to notice that plus after the hand. That plus behind the pocket deuces means the hand itself or any better ranked starting hands. The random button forces that the opponent uses any two cards. The next opponent, here it's the second one, uses random cards. This button is very helpful for the small and big blind positions, when previously nobody opened the game by betting. Say you're on a late position with Jack 10 suited and nobody has raised before. In case you would only limp with your drawing hand, then at least the big blind would remain in the game. This setting is needed for the first preflop simulation. This is related to the big blind's option to check, or in case of the small blind, to spend only another half. After an opponent on the blind position finally acted passively, it's recommended for most games to fold the random cards and choose the starting hand range for passively acting blinds instead. This passive starting hand range uses at best a middle class hand. The strongest one for this table environment is Ace-8 offsuit. Therefore, this range is Ace-8 minus. Here the notation includes a minus character after the hand to indicate a reversed range. The big blind, respectively the small blind, is using a hand that is weaker or equal than Ace-8. All the valuable hands which are displayed above the selection are therefore excluded from being dealt to this specific opponent. Alternatively, to folding each opponent's hand individually, you might prefer to delete all the given opponent's cards at once, using the Del All button. Furthermore, the new button achieves the same thing too, in addition to removing your own hand and the board. After touching the right button again, you switch the current view to the tap screen. The tap counter is the tool for keeping track of your opponent's playing and raising frequency. So why would you want to do that? The idea of counting the play-raise occurrences is to find out the starting hand ranges of all your opponents. These ranges are automatically created for every opponent during the counting process, as long as there are no predefined community cards. Hint: you're neither forced to use the tap counter nor specify exact opponent hole cards or individual ranges for every opponent. iRuleThem offers very advanced configuration settings to determine all the likely opponent's hands which are played or raised. The tap counter feature is something that's left to be presented to you in detail during a future video. By using the left button, you can navigate all the way back. Now I jump into the configuration to tell you the most important aspects regarding starting hand ranges within iRuleThem. First, I want to disable the Against Best feature. That's because I'm going to use a single starting hand range as replacement. It isn't required but recommended when no other opponent uses such an Against Best originated hand. The Strengthomat is the tool for easily creating starting hand ranges for up to 6 opponents by knowing their playing or raising frequencies. Every starting hand range starts with a barrier hand and adds all stronger hands. Overall, there are 169 different generalized starting hands available. Now I enter the numbers 15 for the played entry and 100 for the overall field. 15 and 100. 15 hands out of 100 result in the opponent's playing frequency of 0.15 or 15%, thus leading to the normal starting hand range Ace-6 suited plus. Alternatively to using numbers for either the amount of played and overall given hands or the frequency from this division, you can browse through all generalized hands and make your decision based on estimating that barrier hand. Doing so, you can select built-in hand group, low hand, medium hand, calling hand, or raising hand, to begin with the worst hand from each group. Thereafter, the buttons Previous and Next are handy for selecting the next weaker or stronger following hand. When making a normal range wider, it means to include some more following worse hands. This procedure leads to a higher playing occurrence, what decreases the opponent's strength. On the opposite direction, when narrowing a range, you take away some of the worst among all hands. This results in a lower playing occurrence. A lower frequency means, of course, a stronger and less convenient opponent. A range in poker is fundamentally an array of starting hands which are expected to be used by either an individual opponent or all of your opponents. The to min and to max options are used for every opponent without exact pocket cards, and the add plus button adds the according starting hand range only for the next following opponent. Otherwise, when using the tap counter for any involved opponent, his range gets automatically displayed right here in the first configuration interface for adapted redefinition of the barrier hand. Such a barrier hand candidate can be Ace-Jack offsuit. After touching the Hands button, in the bottom navigation bar you can overview those hands. The starting hand ranking sheet is automatically selecting the barrier hand, Ace-10 in this case. By using the starting hand rankings sheet, you can also select another barrier hand for the configuration. Now I select Ace-Jack to be the new barrier before returning. As you can recognize, in the updated interface the barrier hand is now shifted to Ace-Jack. So this displayed strength Omat definition is indicating that the opponent plays every hand between Ace-Jack offsuit and aces. Therefore, his resulting average hand strength is exactly half the specified frequency of 0.076 or 7.6%. The most elegant way to find out how good on average the opponent's hand is can be achieved by simply calculating 2 times the overall played hand amount. Here the stat of the overall field is given with 1000. 2 times 1000 equals to 2000, what cuts the frequency to its half. Check this out now. A frequency of 0.038 or 3.8% respectively. The exact hand Ace-King offsuit is the resulting opponent's average hand value, originating from the used starting hand range Ace-Jack offsuit plus. Okay, now back to the Ace-King of Hearts example. Say after re-raising to $5, both blinds folded their holding, and the first opponent in play shoves. This means he pushes his remaining stack to the middle. Overall, his entire bet is $25.50. Thereafter, the second opponent lays down his cards. Because this is an all-in scenario, I have to start over with touching on the all button. A kind shortcut to activate all-in on the setup screen. Right away, every hand ranking is based on the river instead of the previously considered flop. Thereafter, I'd guess tens or better will do the trick for the opponent's hand. Now I start over with the first calling hand Ace-Queen suited. Thereafter, I switch to the next following stronger hand, resulting in the targeted barrier hand 10-10. Alright, it's time to add the guessed starting hand range with an occurrence of 0.034 or 3.4%. After returning to the opponent screen, you can see that the opponent is using that previously added starting hand range tens plus. This opponent plays in addition to Ace-King any pair that is equal or better ranked than tens. For that reason, his starting hand might be tens, Ace-King, Ace-King suited, jacks, queens, kings, or aces. The opponent's average hand value is in between those 7 sequenced starting hands. After returning to the setup screen, you can validate that the all-in switch has been enabled by previously using the shortcut. Now the simulation is running against a single opponent, who is holding the very strong starting hand range tens plus. The equity of holding the winning hand is lower than before, but this time it's based on the river. Right after performing the showdown, the new situation leads to an equity of 43%. Furthermore, the betting specifics are new, as well as the opponent's starting hand expectation, so another pot odds evaluation is requested. The pot consists of the blinds accounting for $1.50, the second $2 wager of the opponent who already gave up his hand, my own $5 re-raise, and the $25.50 bet as reaction from the aggressor who pushes his remaining stack. When summing everything up, it's equal to $34, which makes the total amount in the pot. The bet is $25.50. As said, the overall stack of a raiser is the same as his all-in bet. Here it's $25.50. This is resulting in a low but positive expected value. Not very much gain on average. Question to the viewer. Have I forgotten anything, or is everything relevant declared? Any submitted user share of that open bet amount has to be declared first. It's always decreasing the hand's requirements by decreasing the inverse pot odds. Therefore, $5 has been my previous raise amount before my opposition pushed all in. Because my inverse pot odds are lower than the hand's equity of receiving the winning hand at the showdown, this is a profitable call here. As you can learn with Ace-King suited, you have enough potential to call in this spot profitably. The expected value from this situation is plus $3.07. That positive number means this is so-called plus EV. Keep in mind that this depends on the starting hand range of my opponent, as well as how well my range conclusion has been. Against a very tight opponent with only kings or aces, calling doesn't make any sense at all. In case I'm new at the table and not able to make an educated guess, calling is always dangerous, but most times more profitable than you would estimate. This is because people tend to play mediocre hands very aggressively these days. Subsequently, I show you the diagrams of this hand before we move on. The first overall bar diagram has a dashed line which shows the needed equity for calling a pot-sized bet. That is what the dashed white line stands for. And the blue dashed line is your received equity of the simulation. Now I want to demonstrate the same example against a very tight opponent with a raising frequency of only 1.1%. Therefore, I return back into the configuration. Experienced players know that the chance of drawing kings or aces is given with a frequency of about 1%. Exactly, it's every 111th hand, which is on average either kings or aces. When having a pre-flop raising occurrence or frequency, all you need to do is enter that value in the frequency field to receive the range back. Therefore, I simply type in that frequency of 0.011. All what's needed is the second zero and both following ones. For convenience, the beginning of that number, speaking of the zero and the point before the first decimal place, is already written in. At the 9-player table with pre-flop all-in, the starting hand range is KK plus, kings or aces. Now the range is ready for a very tight opponent who very hardly ever declares a preflop all-in action. Furthermore, I also have to fold the previous opponent's range of 10-10s plus. Okay, now I'm prepared to simulate the hand's equity. The equity of winning the showdown gets really poor. The final pot odds evaluation is right on its way. Remember, the betting specifics remain the same, but the opponent's starting hand range is now only kings or aces. Therefore, by calling the open share of the 25 and $1.50 bet, I would lose $7.87 on average. Therefore, this call is minus EV and wouldn't be a wise play. I end this presentation by showing you the diagrams against a very powerful competitor. As you can see, barely any hand combination is good enough besides a straight or a flush. This is Reiki from Reiki Bytes. And don't forget, iRuleThem is where education meets poker. Thank you for watching and goodbye.